According to the TV we're on. Okay, welcome to the 1 o'clock at 1:05. It is June the 4th, just shocking. Call this meeting to order. The first item is discussion with the mayor's office and representatives from Impact Tulsa regarding the proposed FY 25-26 budget and anticipated program outcomes for the Office of Children, Youth, and Families. So this is your item. Do you want to take the lead here?
Sure.
Invite people up.
Yeah. Hi, I think we have space over here.
Yeah, one on that side,
Yeah.
and then you can sit right there too. Sarah.
I put this on because this is a proposal that we've kind of heard the title of the office, and you know, we did a budget action this fiscal already, but it wasn't until we were in Tribal Nations Relations that I actually saw like the first handout with like bullet points and things, and that was in our backup document. So when I was in Tribal Nations Relations in April, Deputy Mayor Reyes presented that to the committee, and I just said to her, like, this is good information, but the full council's not in this meeting. So could you come present to the full council before our budget vote, so that we can get this level of detail as we deliberate approving a budget with the $250,000 ask to establish this office. So that's why it's here, and that's why we have Ashley Phillipson with us, and I will just turn it over to Impact Tulsa.
Great. I'd also like to invite Deputy Mayor, Crystal Reyes, who I believe is going to start us off.
I think she's on Zoom.
Yeah,
she's in the corner.
Hi. And then I will follow up.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you see me okay?
Yes.
You're good.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for letting me zoom in to the meeting, and Council, thank you for the opportunity to share what we shared at that Tribal Relations Committee, and a bit more since it's been about a month since then. So we'll have some additional information to share. Again, I'm the Deputy Mayor, and I oversee the launch of this initiative, Office of Children, Youth, and Families. And I'm joined by Ashley Phillipson, the Executive Director of Impact Tulsa, and also leading the operational implementation of the Office of Children, Youth, and Families. And so what I wanted to do is just very briefly give the high level, so we have all that information of the partnership and the goals, and then Ashley will walk through, I think, the materials you have have in front of you that share a little bit more of the detail and flavor of what the office will and has been doing, and then also the goals going forward. So hopefully that'll give a little bit more rounded picture, and also happy to answer questions at the end or throughout. As I mentioned, Impact Tulsa is the operational arm of the Office of Children, Youth, and Families. And in other words, that's the hub that is implementing this office to lead the initiatives from cradle to career. And we'll talk more about kind of examples of what that looks like within. But the cradle to career continuum that we want to impact. That is one of the goals of the city, to improve student outcomes. I think we're all aligned on wanting to see our children thrive and be happy, healthy, and have opportunities that get them on a path to academic mobility. And this is one way that we're able to achieve that. And so Impact Tulsa will be building the infrastructure, and already is, and we'll kind of share some examples of having this office really being able to step in when there's an emergent need in our youth community. But the infrastructure to help build and improve, align systems, policies, programs to get us to that goal related to improving student outcomes and getting an additional 15,000 youth on a path to economic mobility. So the contract we have with Impact Tulsa provides funding for some of the staff, and we actually, I think, get a really great return. Because we don't just get Ashley's expertise and experience, we have the full force of an organization that can come in and support many of these initiatives and policies and implementing emerging issues, addressing emergent issues. And then we also have not only that with team expertise, but through that organization, connections with broader resources and supports nationally. Tulsa's been getting a lot of attention for the work that it's doing to address youth outcomes. And of course we have a mayor with this background as well. So I feel like Tulsa is ahead of a lot of cities in this regard, and we've been getting a lot of people and organizations interested in supporting the work. And then of course we also have such an engaged community that I think rallies around a goal like this, and from the nonprofits, residents, businesses, the service providers. So there has been a lot of interest, and we can see that through kind of near perfect attendance we had at our first children's cabinet meeting, and kind of near perfect acceptance of wanting to be part of it across so many sectors in our city. So that's kind of like the broad, the who, what, where of the Office of Children, Youth, and Families. But really, Ashley is here and will be able to walk you through some of the more concrete examples of what has been taking place in just the few short months that we've been able to implement, the kind of launch of this and our hope for continuing the work going forward.
Any questions for Deputy Mayor Reyes before I transition to the deck? And is it okay if I just say next to whoever?
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be best, actually. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So thank you all for having me here. I appreciate the diligence to understand about more about the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families and the requested resources. If we could go to the next slide. This time that I have with you, would love to just reiterate the purpose of the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families, the priorities that we've outlined, which align with the Mayor Council priorities, as well as the multiplier effect of having a Cradle to Career partnership embedded in the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families. And then just the excitement around Tulsa leading in this space as a national model with the partnerships and interest in supporting this work on the ground. So we can go to the next slide. And I just want to remind us of the handout that Deputy Mayor Reyes shared of the vision and mission of the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families. That document also just gives an overview of the structure of the office, the recently launched cabinet, where Councilor Gilbert is a member, or attended the last meeting, of course, as a member.
Councilor Hall.
And Councilor Hall Harper was unable to be there, but we've chatted offline. I just want to call your attention to those images at the bottom. We know that the goals of this administration is by 2030 we will have and you might have heard Mayor Nichols say 15,000 additional young people on a path to economic mobility. And at the last cabinet meeting, we actually zoomed out to what that means. 15,000 additional means that by 2030, of the youth that are in public schools in the city of Tulsa limits, this actually goes beyond to the county. We will see 100,491 youth on a path to economic mobility. And what does that mean? Starting with that little clip art baby right there, that means that we will see over 6,000 students being kindergarten ready in Tulsa because we have public pre-K. That means we will have recruited and helped inform families of why they should enroll in pre-K. And you'll hear more about that strategy later. They're reading by third grade. They are doing well on their middle grade math. When we look at if you could go back down to that, it was the slide with the, not go down, there you go, with the icons. What is the Mayor's Office of Children and Families? Very important that we have stronger math outcomes, especially when we look at the professions that are here, and we want to retain talent and have homegrown talent. Graduating and then going on to a post-secondary pursuit, whether that's a college, university, career tech, tech hubs, etc. And then once they graduate, we want Tulsa's youth to be able to work, live, and play in our great city. So going to continue down, the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families. Children, of course, are our future. We want to think about Whitney Houston's song as I say this. Despite existing efforts, we do have fragmented systems. We are a program-rich city. In our work, and maybe in you all's districts, you see that we have opportunities to strengthen coordination of programs, have a better understanding of how resources are improving outcomes across your districts. And the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families, because children and families are at the center, allows us to de-silo efforts. We have data that will be coming up with our cabinet in our August meeting, where we will understand we'll have a fiscal map for the city of Tulsa. Where are public dollars going and how are they impacting outcomes from cradle to career for youth and families? Where are private dollars going? And is there a better opportunity to strengthen this? How does that align with the city budget? Budgets reflect our values. To what extent do our values represent cradle to career success for students? So by embedding this work in city government, we do have the opportunity to partner with city departments to talk to and work with city councilors in a way that on our own we have not been able to, especially accelerating this fiscal map where we bring together the cabinet, which of course is comprised of city departments, tribal nations, city of Tulsa districts, philanthropy, industry, to work in a concerted effort to reduce duplication and accelerate results. So I'm going to slide down to the next image.
I really like that last sentence.
Yeah.
I really
Reduce
do.
duplication?
Yep, I really
I'm
like
glad
that
you
last
recommended
sentence.
that.
Say it again, say the last sentence one more time.
Reduce duplication. Was that what I said?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This next slide, and I apologize, it is very word dense, but you have it in a hard copy, and that is because I want you to have all the information. Here are the strategies that were outlined in our scope of work, proposed to you all when we initially met, and I will go back over that now. So you're looking at the strategies that should also mirror the mayor-council priorities. We want to support you all's work in ending homelessness and also increasing affordable housing. One of those strategies is a student-centered service response model. Last year, our team actually presented on the over 3,000 unique cases of students who were evicted since the start of the pandemic, and have been working with Tulsa Public Schools to figure out, once a student is evicted, 77% of those students also are chronically absent. How do we triage these resources, these wonderful nonprofits that we have, to make sure families are stabilized and that housing is secure? One question I remember, and I really appreciate Counselor Lakin and Counselor Dr. Wright asking, what about students in Jenks and Union? And because of you all's initial vote for the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families, we're in the process of expanding that eviction alert, which is going to be roughly about $7,000 per district, to expand that evictions data so that Union Public Schools and Jinx Public Schools can also coordinate said services. Because for those who either don't remember or I haven't shared that with you, we don't currently track evictions at the city level or the county level. So we have partners that are scrubbing that data manually. So with the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families, creating this infrastructure, that would not be possible without the initial investment from the city of Tulsa. In addition to stabilizing families, pursuing funding to embed legal and social supports. So in the city of Tulsa, the highest rate of evictions is in East Tulsa and South Tulsa. So we see districts 2 and 6. And we do a lot of our work through pilots. So how can we make a test case? We see that this works, embedding legal counsel, embedding wraparound partners into these schools. In Kansas City, we've seen chronic absenteeism and evictions reduced by a third where this has happened. So we want to test that in these 2 sites. And then, of course, can think through what would it take to scale given the high rate of evictions. Tulsa leads in evictions across the country. And we are pursuing funding as a nonprofit to embed counsel into these schools and hope to have that secured and launched by August 2025. Also, just based on a work group, leveraging tenant support and protection policy, how do we prevent displacement and reduce repeat evictions? And we've looked at our friends at Kansas City, and this is work that, this conversation did start in the previous administration with some of you all on council as well. I'm going to continue going left to right on the strategies, and then we'll go to the timeline. With regard to improving student outcomes, I'll reference a Georgetown study that did a 20-year longitudinal study, and we know that pre-K in Tulsa strengthens a child's opportunity to be reading by 3rd grade, to be well-positioned to matriculate to and through K through 12 and on to college and career. So we are working to target high needs zip codes so that 75% of all eligible 4-year-olds in Tulsa who are going to go to public school are enrolled in a pre-K. We are currently doing that across the county. That'll be about 6,000 students. And then also launching Reading Around the 918, really hoping to enlist city departments, the mayor, the council, to create or to shift mental models around what literacy means. Just data shows we need to be able to read to learn and treat it as a public health enabler. So launching the Read Around the 918 literacy campaign in partnership with the Tulsa City County Library, and then working with our district partners to establish an early warning literacy tool. What does that mean? Right now we have students bracketed into what we consider tier 1. They get general instruction. You go to class and you learn to read. You have tier 2 and tier 3 students who are more higher needs and at risk of not scoring proficient or higher on their 3rd grade exam. Our data showed that a lot of our external partners, again, how do we strengthen efforts in addition to just reducing duplication? We're using different data sets. We're using mismatched curriculum. So working to develop a literacy tool that gets folks speaking the same language around data so that if I'm an outside organization going to Patrick Henry and doing tutoring, I can speak the same language with that school staff. I can also speak the same language with Gaining Ground or whoever is going into schools so that we are being very targeted, deliberate, not wasting time, and actually making, I would say, an aligned difference for students. And then going on to ensuring economic opportunity for all. Probably one of the most exciting things is establishing a graduation to workforce pathway. We have disparate programs across the city, but there is not a codified infrastructure on how we get people from high school to jobs. We have done lots of conversations with young people who want paid internships, who want to work, and are excited to bring together our workforce partners, also plug into tech hubs, also get more students involved with the city departments We currently have the, I keep saying working with a wrench. I know that Union Public School students,
Learning with a wrench.
say that one more time?
Learning with a wrench.
Learning with a wrench, not earning with a wrench, but learning with a wrench. What does it look like to scale that across other departments? Not overwhelm departments, but really get students plugged into city departments. And then also developing the infrastructure to identify students and connect them to internships in a more streamlined citywide way, and not just strength upon, which school district or which school you attend. Lastly, making Tulsa the safest big city in the country. Again, it's important to name, the Decreasing Violent Crimes, we applied with the City of Tulsa and Tulsa Police Department prior to Mayor Nichols joining, or prior to Mayor Nichols being elected, excuse me. But that has positioned us to think about safety in a city department way. We recently received a phone call about how might we launch a summer safety strategy, just given the shootings downtown, the spike in violence that you typically see in the summer, and are happy to kind of respond to that as the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families, using best practices that we've seen across our partners in other cities. I'm gonna pause there. If there are any questions on strategies.
Just a really quick question, because I was part of the meeting that initiated that call, but I think that was related to the My Brother's Keeper programming.
Yeah.
Or I'm just transparently having trouble following, because we have a lot of active moving parts of the work that I can't tell what's embedded within what you all are doing specifically because you have the city contract versus what Impact Tulsa does anyway.
Yep.
If there's a way to clarify a little bit of that.
Yeah, so what Impact Tulsa does anyway. What we currently do, we because we are a data organization, and I would say focused on closing barriers, we are already working on chronic absenteeism. What we are doing apart from what you see here is how might we improve transportation, which is a barrier, and we are working with city departments there. We are working on a walking school bus. Sorry, do y'all want me to?
Oh, we're queuing up for the
I'm
questions.
gonna let the chair know that I would like to have some questions.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm listening to you.
Oh, yeah,
while I'm
yeah.
saying
I thought I was
something.
I'm going back.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Transportation, safety,
The walking school
and
bus.
the
you
walking
said?
school bus, and
Sorry,
Metro
define
Lincoln ridership.
What's a walking school bus?
A walking school bus helps mitigate the effects of like not safe routes to school, whether it is because students are walking through an area that is either densely populated by people or things that are not necessarily safe and that might lower parents' confidence to send their child walking to school. We know, of course, there are loose dogs. There are some places where there are not sidewalks. We are working with NCOG to think through these strategies for Riverwood, for example. How do we use this data to launch more walking school buses across the city and create a walking school bus link? So to answer your question, there are distinctly different, but there are also distinctly tied together things that I would say make this marriage conducive to our shared goals. We meet with NCOG, and we will continue to meet with NCOG whether we were here or not. I do think that there is a great interest in city departments who show up and say, how can we help? So that's the attendant strategy.
A walking school bus is an adult walking
Sorry, I
children
didn't
to
finish my
school.
answer.
Yeah,
and
I
adult
got that,
walking back.
yeah.
Yep.
So like a cluster of kids with a
Yep.
chaperone.
Yes. Thank you for redirecting us there.
Okay, just because we
We don't have all the time in the world.
2:30, which we're probably gonna push until 2:45, and we have 17 agenda items. I'm gonna keep moving us along.
Okay.
Did you have your hand up?
I did.
Yes, okay, you're
So I-
first, and then you're
yeah.
next, and then.
Well, it tags on to what Counselor Ballas
and
just
then I
asked,
know
how
who
much
else
is
we're doing.
current,
Okay.
Yep.
and
We'll just keep going.
how much of this is scaling what you're already doing?
I would say, I actually wouldn't answer it that way. What I'm excited that the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families has enabled is the grounds to look at the financial, public-private layout of this city, and to have people gathered around a table who have the power and the autonomy to think through, wow, we're spending millions here, and we haven't moved the needle, what do we need to do differently? That is a conversation we have not been able to have until the mayor said, let's have the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families. We're going to look at the fiscal map And that is also a tool for council, as you all are figuring out how you want to direct resources, how we want to coordinate. The Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families also allows us to scale our Know Your Number. So Impact Tulsa's data work highlighted what would it take to say we have people on a path to economic mobility, and that number is 100,491 young people. The call to action from the Mayor's Office, the Children's Cabinet to align tribes, philanthropy, city departments, districts, would not have happened before. We have lots of nonprofits around the table. We have supportive philanthropy, but never this cross-sector alignment to say we have an entire city engaged in a plan that's not just something on paper, but there's accountability embedded in public and private sectors. So I can speak more. I know I want to honor y'all's time, but in terms of the infrastructure and the post-secondary, that is because of the Mayor's Office, ensuring economic opportunity for all. Making Tulsa the safest city in the country was already in play. Assembling an ad hoc group to think through what is our safety strategy for the summer with city departments, with police, is, hey, you all, the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families, I need you to help us figure out how to keep young people safe. Pre-K enrollment is something that we relaunched without the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families. Reading around the 918 requires the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families. So I can go into more detail, but this is not just business as usual, because there are things that we are doing in service of the shared priorities. Does that answer your question a little bit? I'm trying to be accelerated because
Yeah, no, that's helpful, because I think a lot about this, I think I mentioned last time you were at the table, like, in Dallas, like Mayor Mike Rollins at the time convened the Child Poverty Action Lab, and it did matter to get all these different types of government entities together, and I understand that it does matter when we have, like, government choose to convene and not just it happening in some of these external spaces.
Yeah.
Which is still, like, to me, I do see some of this as, like, layers of collective impact models, Office of Children, Youth, and Families, collective impact, Impact Tulsa, collective impact, birth rate strategy, collective impact, and then all those filter things to direct service programs. So there, it's a little hard to parse through acknowledging
Yep.
the need for convening, with those are a lot of layers of bureaucracy before you get to,
Yeah.
like, dollars and resources directly to people.
Yeah.
So that, like, feels a little, I'm just acknowledging that feels a little sticky to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one other element there is, like, when I look at, for instance, in Dallas, what they did with Child Poverty Action Lab, which really has incredibly similar goals to the George Kaiser Family Foundation's Birth Through AIDS strategy, that just was convened by that city. They did, the first thing they did, and the first person they brought in through this guy Alan Cohen, was they did a lot of fundraising. And it was a lot of external grant dollars to do, like, you're talking about, like, a pilot piece first. And then, like, I think, you know, like, it started off with city time and staff time in the convening part, but it, like, didn't necessarily start out with, like, city programmatic dollars, which I know that these are, like, almost like kind of city consulting dollars with you all, so I know it's not the same.
Yeah.
I'm just naming, there's kind of just, like,
Yeah.
I think that's, like, the tricky part is, obviously it matters, and we see this, I'm naming this to my colleagues, that when the city puts forward money, as, you know, Ashley, like, expertly laid out, then other groups come to the table too, and they're
Yeah.
like, okay, the city's investing, we should invest as well. So it could be a bit of a chicken and the egg thing.
That's a really good point, and
Yeah.
I would want to say it goes further
Yeah.
than CPAL. So
Yeah.
I don't know where that is on the slides, but for example, there is a federal grant for $20 million for infrastructure in highways. I leveraged the role of the Mayor's Office of Children and Families to reach out to the planning office, streets and stormwater, and was told, hey, we would love to apply for this. We need $40,000 for someone to write the grant for us. Let's do it next year. You don't need $40,000 to write a grant. That is something our team will do. We have the data to make a strong case for why Tulsa should receive $20 million, which adds capacity to the city and avoids spending $40,000 for a grant writer. When we do that, we also have national partners who have a vested interest in federal dollars coming to Tulsa for similar projects. So we're not just looking at academic grants. We're looking, our charge from Strive Together, and I think it's another reason why Mayor Nichols tapped Impact Tulsa, is we're interested in federal dollars being brought down to the city. We're interested in state policy. So I know you all have lobbyists at the state. We, our research helped inform a bill that was passed in the House and the Senate. Governor Stitt did not sign that, but that we want to align city interests at the city, state, and federal level. And that translates to dollars. We are going beyond programmatic, and not, no disrespect to programs, but have a vested interest in sustainable change. So when we talk about reducing duplication, when we talk about these pilots, what translates to a process change? What translates to an ordinance? What translates to a budget item that will make the difference henceforth now and forevermore? So that is our interest in making these things happen and having that conversation at the city cabinet level, I would say.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful, or I would just suggest that maybe future materials would be really helpful from like that council perspective to lay out some of the like federal dollar and grant
ROI.
pursuit and like acquisition paired with like the imminent policy recommendations and changes, because for instance, when I looked at like the contract, like, it's like, we're gonna form like, action groups or this or that, and it's like, that's all good, but if it doesn't come with you all then going, here's the policies that the council needs to do,
Yep.
then,
Well, it does.
Yeah.
So I want to
Yeah.
just direct your attention to this timeline here. This is
Right.
not something coming from on high.
Yeah.
We're saying this is the thing.
Okay.
If you look at March through June, launching the cabinet, establishing a baseline of opportunity and access with what is the state of affairs with the systems that are shaping how students show up at school. Going from June to July, or July through September, with the fiscal map, our cabinet then is going to figure out what is our policy agenda. So that is not something that we decide. One of our operating models is co-development and community voice. So the action alliances are critical because they have the lived experience. They are the practitioners in those groups. If you remember the two-pager that Crystal shared with you, that is where the policy recommendations are going to be born from. So you should see like this figure 8 of action alliances informing cabinets who are making recommendations to the council. We can happily get a logic model to you all there. I don't have a policy agenda to share with you because the cabinet is going to develop that policy agenda.
The
aligned
recommendation,
to this.
great.
Yeah, so, that, we can get that to you all by Friday in terms of the logic model of the process between Action Alliance, Cabinet, and Council. And then, I'll stop on the timeline unless there's any questions there. I know Council Director Wright. And then I just wanted the things that, just to preview, building civic muscle and bringing in resources. I do think it's important to note the multiplier effect of this Cradle to Career partnership, our national connections, and the technical assistance, national visibility, and resources that will add capacity to the city. In terms of, we've attracted a Fuse Core Fellow, which will help lead the post-secondary pathways. That is a Balmer-funded role where they're interested in supporting post-secondary infrastructure in our community. That will place a corporate person into this role. They want that is what Fuse Fellows do. Hunt Institute has offered policy and advocacy technical assistance with regard to what bills happening at the state and federal levels advance the mayor council priorities and how can we help advocate there. We have a conversation set up with Bloomberg, who would like to support our 0 through 3, which is not as plugged in our K through 12 conversations, but what does childcare look like, just given financial state of affairs. Strive Together has offered not only technical assistance, but $75,000 to convene community members, to pay stipends to young people and community members, very interested in having cross-district, community-informed conversations that will inform strategies, policy recommendations, community needs. We do feel it is important to pay people for their labor, and we'll gladly leverage that resource. We have an Urban Leaders Fellow for Youth Voice. What does it look like to not tokenize youth, but to have actual youth ownership? And then lastly, we were selected for the Harvard Ed Redesign Success Planning Institute. They have models for pairing trusted adults with young people and have seen drastic reductions in chronic absenteeism, violence, hoping to leverage this for our CVI-PI Community Violence in East and North Tulsa initiative. So we are excited to also bring additional resources that are no cost to the city, but definitely advance city efforts. And
Okay,
then,
we're gonna-
I think, that's it.
We're gonna have to keep
Okay.
going, or else we will run out of time.
Okay.
So you have a follow-up?
I do. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah.
For our newer counselors, Ms. Phillipson did work for the city before she was at Impact Tulsa, so she knows where the bodies are buried in this building to some extent. And I just appreciate your passion and your expertise. This question's for Deputy Mayor Reyes. Can you hear me, Crystal? So the ask on the budget, on the general fund to establish this is $250,000 for next fiscal, correct?
I think the full year cost was $275.
$275? And is that the anticipated cost, or is that just to get started?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Is that the anticipated cost annually, or is that just to get started?
That's the anticipated cost, but for the first year, and that was working with Impact Tulsa and Ashley to figure that out. But again, to even the slide that's on the screen, like we hope to leverage external funding to support the work going forward. So the outline that Ashley provided at the bottom of the previous slide is the work that has
Yeah.
really started in earnest and will continue throughout the year. But we hope to leverage additional funding to support and supplement the funding that the city provides. But
Yeah,
that
so I
funding,
I
she can speak to detail. Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's-
understand that
it's-
this partnership unlocks dollars that maybe we wouldn't be drawing down, like the
Yeah.
infrastructure that we just heard. I think
Yeah.
as somebody who's in the last meeting, looking at, can we find $80,000 for a vet that we know we've needed for 4 or 5 years? $275,000 is a lot to start something new. And so is there any concept that launching this year could backfill some of these general fund dollars and offset with grant support for the office itself so that it's not on the general fund?
Is the question if the entire cost could be covered by
Or a
grants? Is
portion
that your question?
thereof? Are we striving to find private dollars to invest in this very worthwhile work? When we know for years for ART, also worthwhile work, we had to use grant funding to do proof of concept for 3 years. There's things that we want to do, and I don't think anyone at this table is like, no, families, children, and youth do not need support. It's how do we do it with revenues that are tight, expenses that are accelerated, opaque vision of what the economy is doing, and committing to $275 to start. I'm just asking the question, is there an idea that philanthropy or private dollars or grants or whatever could help offset mid-year, like a mid-year adjustment? So that we don't actually realize $275,000 in cost for the first year.
Yeah, I would say we never take that off the table, that if there is potential funding source that could supplement work or partnership, so I mean, that's the yes, that we would always pursue that. And I think we would have to, discuss, there's the amount that we would need to continue the work, right? And the 275 does go a full year, and so we were able to find funds in this year to start the first few months, so maybe there is a little bit of flexibility there, I think.
Yeah, the 117 to get started was 2 positions in finance that they have said weren't filled, but they plan to fill. So I do have concerns about the large investment, not because I don't think it's worthwhile, and thank you for hearing us on Jenks and Union. I think when you start looking at eviction data, you will see that District 7 is quite high.
Yep.
I don't know if it's having the same impacts on truancy, but I know it's affecting families. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand me, like, important work, taking silos down, making the dollars go further. I feel challenged right now, to borrow Counselor Bengals' phrase, on how we make a new investment like this when we continue to literally nickel and dime, long time investments that we've been making that we still are not 100% able to deliver on. So that is not an Ashley Phillipson issue. It is an issue now with our deputy mayor, I hate to say, Crystal, and with Mr. Miller, and ultimately the mayor. So that's where I'm struggling, is we've committed 117 just to get us to this point. We're looking at 275 out of general funds with this idea that maybe down the line it might end up being more for next fiscal, I don't know. And that's where I'm really concerned.
Yeah, I think I
Also
just-
hearing like
I
we don't
agree.
have budget for overtime and things that we know we're gonna have to do.
3 more people, and then we'll come back. I'm not cutting you off.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. All right, Dutton,
Thank you, Council.
Archie, Bush, and then we're gonna move on. Okay.
I think Counselor Dr. Wright asked questions that I was interested in, so I appreciate that, so I'm gonna move to the next.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, even though I came in a little bit late. Maybe to put it in a way I think about it, when I was a kid, I wanted to go on a mission trip to do X, Y, and Z, and they would say, well, raise your own support. You have to raise your own support if you want to go. So those questions make a lot of sense, what Counselor Dr. Wright is saying. My question was on ensuring economic opportunity for all. So I'll give you this. My question is the relationship between this potential new office and, let's say HR. I'll give you an example. Hoberton School, which is now Atlas, I was talking with one of their executives. You go through the program, they turn you AI and technology. They'll pay your way, help you get a job, pay your loan back. One of those graduates, because it's certification, applied for a tech job here at the city and was denied because they have a bachelor's. And so I wonder, as we survey the landscape of workforce readiness in the city, are we sort of aligning sort of those workforce readiness agencies with, if they're qualified to work in the city, maybe just because they don't have a bachelor's or whatever, can they still get in the door and we utilize those talents? Maybe that's something that would fall into.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
there's a workforce
Yeah.
action alliance, those user experiences, those anecdotes of, here's a barrier, I have this credential, I can't work. That's why you have the city departments at the table as well.
Great.
Good, great example.
Real quick, Counselor Dr. Wright asked my question as well, in this budget issues that we have, just not sure the optics of standing up something new at this price tag is something we need to be doing. However, that being said, it's back to something you said about it being sticky. I would like a better flow chart or circles. You're saying a lot of things, and I know we have a lot of things out there, and I'm not tracking on what this is actually gonna do and what that looks like.
Yeah,
Like
it's
you
hard
said,
to
it's,
parse, yeah, it's hard to
yeah.
parse out the like active work, what you've built and scaled or like dollars brought in or whatever else already, how much, what you all are leveraging, the outcomes piece, cause when I look at both like the documents we've seen and then also the actual contract, none of that actually details some of the really specific, really tangible things you said.
And the partnerships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I wanna quantify, I'm hearing there's a lack of clarity on the structure. Cause I have a structure, I just wanna make sure I have the right things, what I
Like
don't wanna do is
existing
create
stuff
something that's fun.
versus like city specific or newer things, like
Versus-
newer dollars that are also coming in specific to those efforts. And then these actual tangible, like you mentioned, like, attracting external dollars and
That's-
policy pieces,
That's there.
which is, yeah, but even then, that's like, were those fellowships existing anyway?
No,
That's
these are people who said, wow, you'll have a mayor's office of children, youth and families, we wanna help.
I think it would be like helpful for us to be like, what's that dollar
Quantify it,
amount? To
yeah,
be like,
quantify it.
this,
Yeah.
cause it's
Okay.
like,
Yes.
it's almost like, that's like in-kind stuff to the city, but we can't see that. So if that makes it hard to go,
Right.
especially per Counselor Dr. Wright's point, it's like, we've been told by the mayor's office that this is a cut budget year. And here we are scrapping around, trying not to have animals in like our animal services shelter in like abject like squalor, right? Like, and then at the same time, we're being asked to do that, we're being asked to do new things that I think we all really care about, but it ends up feeling like we're having to make choices between like going deep on our existing, like very core city functions or broadening to add things like this that I think all of us agree is like incredibly important and a lot of us work in this space externally.
Okay.
But it's like really hard to justify when we're literally trying to scrap around to do the basics of like what a city is like tasked to do
Okay.
and then put money towards something like this that's newer. Even though, not saying not saying this isn't a city responsibility, it's just when at the same time we can't find money to like even
And the code
close to like the
enforcement
code enforcement that
yeah.
barely staff like
Or
animal
municipal
services.
court.
Or our municipal courts,
For
yeah.
that,
So it's just like all of that, it just ends up being competing, but it can really help us if we can see, here's all of this dollars that this is leveraged already, that helps like offset some of that. Yeah.
In future.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that
Okay.
20 million infrastructure, Ashley, is the first time I'm hearing that. And you all, I think, too, so that's why I put it on for today,
Yeah.
so that we can fully understand, like, the quantitative, like, return.
Yeah.
on-
Yeah, I will,
Yeah.
I will, yeah.
That grant writer thing was
Yep.
huge, because we've also been talking about prioritizing grant writing. So knowing that that's like what your team brings to the table,
Okay.
because we have that 30,000 like sitting out there
Yeah.
on that.
Okay.
Tragically.
Thank you.
Let's move on. I would say, from my personal standpoint, I mean, I'm a little bit confused because I'm trying to blend this conversation with the conversation that we just had, where I was questioning how we're going to add some things for animal welfare, and I was told, oh, we have a big budget and we can move lots of things around.
I said that
I know.
for the people who weren't in the earlier meeting.
And so if we do have the 1.117 or 1.123 or whatever the number is in billions of dollars, and we do have some ability to maneuver, but we have to be very pragmatic about it. I think many of the things said here during this meeting were right on point. But we have really, really thought through this a lot. We've spent many hours with you and the mayor and people from the mayor's office on this topic. And we agreed at the retreat that we were going to put this on our agenda. And it's on the agenda, and we're on the cusp of either funding it or not funding it. And I think that it's worth piloting. You know, I don't know what 275,000 is going to get us. I don't know what it's going to leverage. You've given us some opportunities for leverage here. You've told us some things. I don't know if all those things are gonna work out. I doubt all of them are gonna work out. I'll bet some of them are going to work out. But, we have a new mayor who has said this is one of his top priorities. And I like supporting top priorities, especially if we can have some reports back on what is working and what isn't working, so that in the future we can decide, well, maybe this 275 didn't work out at all, or maybe it worked out really, really well. So I'm still very willing to continue to leave this on our funding priorities, because it was one of our retreat and FY26 priorities as well, which we agreed to in January or February.
At the full 275?
What's that?
There's no dollars on it.
There are no dollars.
Okay.
Right,
And
oh
I
yeah,
just
we didn't
think
agree.
it-
We,
it-
it was right at the end of
We just said
the,
I think it could be a
It was-
priority, it's just, is it a
Yeah, it
general
is.
fund priority?
it was at the end, but everybody was like, yeah, let's add it on. We're good with that. But a lot of, I mean, homelessness costs more than 275.
We just heard it with the budget proposal that we got in April, the 275.
That's what I thought.
I mean, that,
So there is 275 to this.
Yes.
yeah, in
It's in-
January,
it's
we
in
didn't
the
know the
budget.
costs that were coming.
Yeah, it's budgeted at 275 in the budget that was proposed to us by the mayor a month ago.
Yeah,
So-
and if it seems like I'm saying, let's not prioritize the things that we agreed to in January, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we have general fund structural issues right now, and so as we're being so down to, the penny on things, that's why I asked the deputy mayor, are there private dollars that we could pilot and do proof of concept? Same way we did
It could,
other very important
Yeah.
things that we've been working on to get to the general fund.
yeah, but, and as we'll go through in the course of today's conversation, I think, we'll identify additional, and small budget is doing this right now, but we have X dollars of COVID relief fund monies. We have some errors that were made as the budget was presented. It doesn't amount to a whole lot. But there's other things that we can do if, this would be taking this out and then using the 275 elsewhere if we were to not move forward with children, youth, and families. Or we could leave it in and fund some of the other priorities that we have with these other resources that we have. And I've put some things on the table for discussion, but we have a lot of other things to cover too. Like we have a $2.6 million revenue item, and we don't even know how all those revenues will be generated necessarily. We haven't been told, we haven't had that conversation yet.
Could we fund it, and then in the funding, they seek out grants, et cetera, and then we just appropriate those dollars as they come in? Because we have about, just a few weeks.
Appropriate the grant dollars as
Yeah.
they come in?
Yeah.
Well, the grant dollars could go directly to Impact Tulsa though, too. If,
Well, just, I believe what Councilor Dexter Wright is saying is that, are there private dollars? I'm just trying to think, as far as timeline, we're gonna be voting before July. Do you have the opportunity to raise the rest of that money before July?
It would be the city to raise it. I'm not, Impact Tulsa already has to raise money. I'm just saying, could the
Right.
city use some grant dollars or these other funds, CRF, I'm guessing, or these other things, to kind of unburden the general fund, is really what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to not deliver on what we said we would, but
but how do we deliver on it without funding it?
I'm saying, do we have to fund it with the general fund? Are there ARPA clawbacks? Are there CRF dollars that I guess are in the general fund, but they didn't
Yeah,
come
oh,
from
there-
sales tax dollars?
There are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
that's
those
all
are,
I'm saying.
and those are on that list that we're discussing and working our way through.
But not
Well,
everyone
let's-
here at that table knows that, and that's why,
Oh, I know, but that's why I articulated many of those items, because, and I'll tell you on item 4, kind of what the plan is there too, so, just.
no, because you're not in the small budget meeting, so.
Yeah.
I now have a 2-hour one scheduled on the 11th before we get to committee, so
Yeah,
I
that's
guess.
item 4.
Okay, so this is.
Let's, okay, so let's,
you.
let's
Thank
make
you.
it through the, thank you.
I'll
very much.
email your staff by Friday with, and then we
That'd be great.
Okay,
Thank you
so
for what you're doing and
No
your
problem, thank you all,
thoughtfulness.
thanks for your questions.
I don't think we're gonna be.
Thank you. Okay, so item 3, ordinance adopting the annual budget for 26, ordering the transfer of enterprise income to the general fund, appropriating unexpended balances of grant funds, ordering and directing the computation of filing of a levy, for the sinking fund, reserving balance of 10% for emergencies, approving an emergency telephone fee of 5%, ordering the filing of a city budget fiscal year 26, and some other stuff too. Who's talking to us about this? Oh, both of you.
This is just later will be the first reading of adopting the annual budget, and following will be all of the ordinances and resolutions as part of the overall budget adoption.
Is there any change in the 5% emergency telephone fee, or is that just the same
No
thing?
change, same.
Okay.
Yeah. The only change from last year on the items you just read were bringing the operating reserve back up to 10%.
Yep. Any questions on this? This is just the standard language that would be approved probably on June the 18th, not June the 11th. So this just gives us the language as we're going to see it on the action that we're going to be asked to take during council meeting. Any questions?
One quick one.
Yep.
What does the 5% go to? What fund does that go to? General fund, or does that fund 911? What does it do?
That emergency telephone,
It's the,
Yes.
E911.
Okay.
That's the revenue source for those funds,
Okay.
one of the revenue sources of it, yeah. Did you have a
Yeah,
question?
well, you had spoken maybe
Of the reserve.
2 weeks ago about perhaps not going up to 10.
Yeah.
Who decided that it would be a 10?
Just the mayor. The mayor and his staff in the budget that he proposed.
Well, it's a stated goal of the
Right.
city.
But
Oh, exactly.
Right, and so I'd heard that, and then there was maybe a counter at maybe we don't go, maybe we stair step it. That conversation's still not, have we resolved that?
Oh, no, and let's go to item 4, just so that I can,
Talk about that?
yes,
Okay.
I guess this is the place.
You could do at
Anything can be a meeting.
You could do it at 3.
That's why we do it.
Yeah, so here's basically where we are. So I'm not placing any blame here, but the budget came to us a little bit later than it has in the past, but we also have a brand-new mayor and a brand-new mayor's administration, so there's no blame cast in that statement whatsoever. So we got it when we did, we've been working through it, we have a small budget committee of 4 counselors that's been working with the mayor and working with finance for many, many months and many weeks prior to this. But our work gets really serious whenever we get the budget, because now we know what we have to work with. We know what he and his staff want, and we know what the departments want, and we know what we want. It's our budget, it's our collective budget. And so we've been working through some of those items, and we've been taking the items that we hear from all of you and putting it on a list and trying to figure out how do we get the things that are really important to Counselor Dutton or Counselor Bush or even Counselor Bingle. So that we can move forward on those priorities and make as many of them a reality as possible. So there wasn't like a cushion in there that, oh, here's $500,000 or $1 million for the council to use for the priorities that it has. So what we have to do, just like whenever I was talking about, how do we make room for stipends for our non-sworn employees? So I start thinking about ways to do it, and then the mayor's office is thinking about ways to do it. And on June 11th, during a small budget committee meeting that we have from 8:30 to 10:30, our hope is to get as many of these things resolved as possible so that we can come to you at the 1 o'clock next week and say, this is the skeleton of a really good plan. It's not gonna be perfect, but this is how we think we've incorporated as many things as we've heard around this table into the overall budget. And you all can say, at that point, when we're reporting out, that looks pretty good. Did you think about doing it this way? Or that looks pretty good, why isn't my thing on there? Or, I see the 275 is still in there, why? So you can ask all kinds of questions. Then we were originally scheduled to do the budget presentation and adoption on June the 11th to give us enough time to go through the rest of the process. We do not believe that it's fair for us to come on June the 11th and present this to you and then ask you for a vote at 5 o'clock as well. So we're delaying that. Our intention is to delay that, but we really don't have much time after June the 18th because it has to be adopted by statute, right? 7 days before. So
Which is a Monday.
that's the timeline that we're working on, and that's how this is not like a new thing. This is how these things have been handled.
We could
and
also make
assembled in the
amendments down
past.
to the wire as a body, just me.
Oh, yeah,
On a motion.
and as an
Yeah.
individual counselor. But our procedure in the past has been to try to get as much discussed around this table as possible so that we can get all of that stuff incorporated, so that when we go downstairs on the 18th and vote on it, we don't have any agreement, we don't have any formal agreements. That's not legal to have those things. But we have worked together and by consensus really built the budget with the mayor's office so that once we go down there, then we know that we have something that all of us or most of us can support.
At least 5.
Yeah.
At least 5.
So that, I think what Counselor Bush is kind of illuminating is kind of feeling like you're being brought a fully baked cake and saying you have to eat that. And that, I know as you guys go through these small budget committee meetings, some of these things are talked about. And so when we come here, we feel like we're being pushed to go a certain direction that we may not necessarily be comfortable with. And when we're sitting here saying, and I totally grasp the mayor's priority thing, right? I don't take issue with that, but then we have some folks that are sitting in those small budget committees coming to the table and saying, but we're not funding this. And so my challenge is that's where you folks that are sitting in that are having those discussions.
Yep.
And so you're coming out and have already gone through that discussion process, not that I don't feel like these discussions are necessary, but I feel like they're wastes of time because it's challenging enough just going through these individual budget lines. right? in the
What
departments.
meetings are a waste of time? This one?
No,
Okay.
that we're not wasting time.
Oh, right.
Yeah, bringing it to the full
Right.
council is
Yeah.
necessary.
It,
Right.
it ends up being very rushed and then five of us are
Right,
like
because then
very
I
out the
feel
loop.
conflicted about who I'm what is really a priority and important to us.
Because we just don't get as much in-depth time or knowledge, you
That's
know,
what these one-o'clocks
Well-
are for.
which are very crammed.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we don't have a lot of time in those things either. We're not bringing in individual programs to discuss. We're really just trying to figure out, this is what we heard around the 1 o'clock table. This is what was presented to us by the budget. How are we trying to make all of this work with finite resources?
right.
And do it.
Yeah.
But then on top of it, you're adding, we have to do 4% across the board, and then
Right.
we wanna get back up to a 10% operating reserve.
But I think
I
you guys
know.
are getting
And
full
$2.6
conversations with the
million
mayor's
So now
office
you
that
feel like
five of us
both
are
of your
getting.
hands are tied behind your back.
Yeah, we're
wouldn't-
not being brought up to speed.
Well, or
Yeah.
it's not from the council, it's again, like, to me, it's that the four folks are getting time with the mayor's office
Right.
that we're not getting, like, the mayor hasn't come here, Mike's over there, but like, we're not getting a lot of direct mayoral
Right.
information.
Right. And so we're
So it's
hoping
like
that
something-
those meetings are productive enough, so when you're
I know.
coming to us,
Yeah.
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 with these things that, you know, if you do have these conflicts, you know, where you can't figure out what the priority is, that's when it comes to the full collective.
Yeah.
And not necessarily arguing or figuring out every single item that you've already discussed. That's my challenge here, is I don't know if this is what this looks like when you're going through these small budget committee meetings. Whether, you know, you're having to weigh those balances about, as we're having this discussion about the animal shelter and then youth and family services. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so what is really our priority here?
Yeah, we're not trying to say, in those small and anybody else jump in too. Anybody who's ever been on one, jump in here. But the problem is that not everybody has always been on one.
Right.
So last budget meeting that we had in here, I asked Sarah to make a list of all of the things that we discussed. That was the starting place for our small budget committee meeting, the next budget. Because anybody who said anything, their item was on that list. So how do we make
Right,
these
but you've
things?
been having these discussions on a continual cycle, correct?
No.
No.
Not on
that's-
the
that's-
budget,
That's
just
why,
since
that's why I
April.
prefaced it
Yeah.
with.
We don't have weekly meetings of small budget.
No, but you've had them prior to the budget being presented.
Yeah, but most of
Not
those are
about the
just
budget.
related.
Not about the budget, because we didn't see the budget.
Oh, they're about where we are with last year's budget, what
Right.
Like
income
budget
looks like, what
actuals.
expenses look like, and
Yeah,
other
we don't
stuff
have
that's
budget
funds.
proposal
boring.
discussions in small
No, that's
budget
not what
until
I
we
mean.
receive
But
it.
you still have understanding of what's going on budgetary wise?
The kids are arguing.
No?
Just with.
Between you and the mayor, right? Between you
Just,
and the mayor's
just,
office.
okay, so in the past, and again, that's kind of why I prefaced it this way, but I probably didn't do a good enough job of prefacing it. With the new mayor, there were a lot of things that we just didn't know because they're trying to put a budget together from scratch. With the past mayor, we had worked together on the previous budget, and so, yeah, in those small budget meetings, we were talking about things that we had done the year before and things we'd like to do in the next year. But there just wasn't any time to do all that. We really were focused in on finance stuff. We have brought some items to you that emerged from some of those conversations. So I said to Jared, I said, hey, if we're running a little bit hot in some of these categories, then tell us what those are so that we can bring them to the budget meetings, so that we can start addressing them now before they become budget issues next year. So those things have taken place with this mayor's administration. But as far as big broad strokes with respect to what's gonna be in your budget, we got the budget on the same night that you got
Right.
the budget. So there wasn't, help me if I'm missing
So-
something.
But you also have
Sarah
to
can
take
even
in
help.
consideration that as Counselor Lakin said, that this is a new mayor. Some of us are new to the council. We've only been here since December. So, from December until April, trying to put a budget together is complicated. And, but in those small budget meetings, up until April, it was all about revenue, what's coming in, what was coming in 2024, 23, 24, 25, and what's projected in 25. So that's all those discussions up until April, up until this book was given to us the night of April 30th. Thank you. So, after that, we've had, what, 3 small budget meetings? 4? 2? Yeah.
Yeah,
One that
so we're-
went an hour over.
Yeah, so, and all that has been discussion around this book and
With these priorities.
these priorities of 9 of us.
Right.
So, so nothing has, this is a work in progress.
We're just,
This is,
Yeah, I just think you're stating the obvious to me.
Yeah,
The
we-
problem for me is that as we go through this, what are the overarching priorities that we need to focus on? Because like we talked about earlier, we need to cut here, but we're starting something new, right?
So-
At 275. What are the overarching priorities we need to focus on this budget as we meet the goals of 4% cuts? Obviously, we can't predict incomes and revenues, right?
Some of that's in the charter.
Can I-
To your point, it's like
Yeah.
moving back to
So
core
overarching
functions.
priorities are everything that has been on the agenda for this particular meeting. So when we talk about public safety, how are we gonna fund overtime? How are we going to fund police academies? How are we going to fund fire academies? Economic development, how are we going to pay for that infrastructure for new development, right? So how are we gonna end homelessness? I mean, all of these priorities is everything that we discussed in our mayor council retreat is right here. And all of those items are, some of them are included in here, some of them may not be included in here, right? So, but those are the items that we have had on our previous agendas on this 1 o'clock meeting, after April 30th. So
Yeah.
those are the overarching priorities that you are referencing. I hope that you are referencing or
Yeah, I
asking
feel like
about.
you're dumbing it down for me. I totally grasp this. That's not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is when you guys are having these discussions, right? As you, in these small budget committees and you come back to the council, hopefully the discussions focus around these
Yes,
priorities, right?
100%.
So when you're coming to us, we shouldn't have to figure out, if I'm gonna fund animals or I'm gonna fund this new program.
You actually have to, because you get to
I
make
know
a
that,
decision.
but I'm
with
saying,
this.
hopefully you've
We're not
already-
making the
you've had
decision.
part of those discussions amongst yourselves in that budget committee.
No.
Because
We've
as-
had some.
wait a minute,
You
let me
have brought
finish.
some to the table.
As Counselor Bella said, we don't have that face-to-face. I don't have a weekly meeting with the mayor's office specifically. So there are things that are
We don't,
brought
I
to
don't
me.
either.
Yeah, you guys.
I know, let me finish. There are some things that
Just once
come
a
to
month.
us that I've never even heard of until they come to this table.
Yeah.
That's a challenge for me sometimes. So then I feel
but
like,
who do they come from? So just hit that point.
yeah, I'm not saying, it doesn't matter who they come from. If there are things that
Um,
we need to consider and
Or
discuss.
what are, I'm just trying to get a specific example.
But there are
too, just so I
conversations
understand.
and there are things that are brought to the table that I've never even heard of or even knew they were being discussed.
I
Like
know,
what?
but that's like the individual prerogative that we have as counselors. So whenever I brought the idea up for the 1% stipend, it was just my idea. I
Right.
don't know if I really discussed it in one of those small budget committee meetings or not. I know I discussed it with the mayor whenever I went to breakfast with him
Right.
about a month ago. And but I didn't have a plan set out, so I just discussed it at the 1 o'clock with everybody right here. And now we'll have that conversation inside of our small budget committee meeting on the 11th. But we haven't talked about it yet in
Okay.
the small budget committee. Because I was just putting ideas on the table, just like everybody else was putting ideas on the table. Then Counselor Dutton said whatever she did about animal welfare last 1 o'clock. We talked about it this time. and now we'll be in the small budget
Right,
committee.
and that's kind of
So
the point
that's
that I'm
the-
making, it's the worrisome aspect of cuts, getting
I
back
know.
to that 10% operating reserve, saying we don't have money for this, but we have money for this, that's problematic for me. And then we also wanna take care of our city employees in appreciation.
That's what we're
I think
gonna
it's
try to
problematic
sort
for me
out.
too, and I'm in those small budget
Yeah, and
meetings,
I'm
so.
challenged by a lot of
Yeah.
this, cause I'm like, either we're going by this, right? We're built a new facility, we stick to, what we've already
Finish what we're
previously
doing.
committed ourselves to.
Mhm. It's on here somewhere.
Or we do this new thing. That's why I said,
Can I
Oh,
follow
yeah,
up
sorry,
with
yes.
this?
Sure.
Because I hear what he's saying, I guess this is where I'm having trouble, and of course, I know we do budgets a lot different at the state than we do it at the city level, but at the beginning of this little kumbaya meeting we had, Jack Blair gave us a presentation.
It's a good one.
Expenses are here, revenues are here. It's been trending this way for 2 years, and here we have an increased budget. Generally speaking, I can't, I don't have the bandwidth or figure out how to go through this to figure out. But it just seems to me, we should not be having an increased budget when we haven't, or, you don't do that at home when you're balancing your budget. We didn't do this at the state level, you know, it's like, it's a big budget. But have we really addressed the problem?
cuts.
The cuts.
The cuts.
I know, I'm having
we
a
can-
problem with this, that's all. In general.
so I've said
In general.
visually, you feel like you're going eye to eye.
Well, that's
This-
the position we've ended
this
up in, is
important,
this,
this-
around the
But we're
edges,
still
trying to
cutting.
find.
And we wanna pay for
Right.
this, which
Efficiencies.
increases the budget, but we're still cutting.
Well,
And maybe
and
it
you,
needs to
you
be a
have to
different
remember
process.
what we're cutting. We're cutting from a plan year. So we had the plan year at this. Our revenue forecast may have been X, and now they're not X anymore. So it is a cut from what was envisioned, but it's still increasing. The revenues are still projected to increase. The expenses are still projected to increase.
Probably
That-
at a higher rate.
This is an 8.1 increase though from last year, so it's hard to hear a 3 to 4%
That's what I'm
cut
saying.
when
Optically,
it's
just
8.1%
Well,
increase.
maybe finance can explain
Yeah, that's where I'm
That's-
trying to
this
the
a little bit more, because it does.
It's the
Optically
optics.
doesn't it?
When I
Well, I
have
think it's
the
constituents
opposite
calling
of
me
what we're
going,
saying.
what the heck are you all doing?
I know,
Adding
but
all
I-
this-"
I think it-
Because we gotta be able to explain this.
I think it's the nomenclature too. It's not like our budget went from $1 billion to $950 million. That's not what happened.
But that's
Yeah,
what a cut
Christie.
budget of
Christie's
4%
gonna-
would
That's
be.
Christy's
what
gonna
the
help us.
projection
Yeah.
is,
Okay,
and the
no,
language
let's-
we're using is.
So Sarah
Yeah,
asked
the-
me to explain the 3 to 4% cut exercise that we did. I just want to clarify that we asked departments to provide us a list of what they would cut if they had to cut 3 to 4% from their budget. We did not do an across-the-board cut to everyone's budget of 3 to 4%. We looked at what each department submitted, and we decided what we would cut from that. So not every department was cut 4%. Some departments did not get cut at all, and others did get cut at the 4% level. So I think that's what you wanted to clarify, is that we asked everyone to submit it, and then they presented those to the mayor's office and finance, and we looked at it, and we discussed, and then we made it into the proposal. So not everyone was cut 4%.
And I'm still in that conundrum, when
Yeah.
you submitted
Yeah,
that 4% across the board from all these departments, who made the prioritization of where those cuts come from?
Yep.
The
So
mayor's office.
administration.
That's
Because
what
they
I'm saying.
proposed.
But that's how it
to
always,
us.
that's how it
Right.
always works. It
But
starts
that's my
there and then it
challenge,
gets,
Is optically, the 4% that was submitted by these departments about what would you cut, right? Maybe they wouldn't have been cuts that were priorities to us, because I've had a discussion last week about where things that I've been working on for years to get fixed within our own districts. And those are still a challenge. And it comes back to me as funding. I can't get done what I need to get done, but somehow we have funding for other things, and that's my challenge. So,
I,
like I
I
said,
agree, and
this is a frustrating, and I get it, it's that way for everybody. And this is an anxious time of year, especially, the new administration. I totally grasp that, they're in a new cycle.
Yep.
Having to do this for the first time, so I give them the grace of that, obviously. It's just the challenge of the message and the optics.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would, so to that point, and to Counselor Bush's point as well, is, you know, it's designed by charter like this. The mayor submits the budget as he and she have done in decades past and years recent as well. And we end up with what we end up with. But it is our budget. It is not his budget, it's not their budget, it is our budget. And so that's why we spend time looking through the budget book. Sarah has sent out emails, not all of which I've read,
Yep.
but go read the emails if you haven't, that have a pretty
at 9
substantial
o'clock.
list of things that we're working on in small budget, funds available, use of funds, and other things. So we do our very best within the structure that we have. You know, we have to use this working group. That's the way it works. We use these budget meetings to inform the working group, and then we use our committee meetings and the budget meeting to report back out to you, and just to continue to assess and strategize so that we can incorporate as many of our objectives as possible. Okay, you go, and then I'm gonna move on.
Okay, I just have.
How would you change it?
That's
I
not a charter
apologize.
amendment,
Did I
you have to
derail us?
amend the charter.
Did
Which we tried-
I know we have
derail
to
us?
amend
I'm
the
sorry.
charter.
Yeah, to do it.
What'd you say?
Did I derail us by whining and complaining?
No.
No,
Coun-
this is
Coun-
an experience, and
Go ahead.
I've been on the committee, the,
Small budget.
small budget, and I've not. So I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've sensed it. When I'm out, I'm like, yeah, we just, okay, whatever y'all say. You know, because there is a lack of information there, because we can't have more than 4 people. It would be nice to do it all
Right.
with 9 of us, but then it would be a public meeting, right? And so we have those barriers that we have to deal with, and it's
Yep.
based from the formation of our charter and how we govern in the city of Tulsa.
Yeah, I'm just
So-
basically saying I don't want us contradicting ourselves.
That's another part
Wait.
too, because then you have a new administration. He won an election, he or she wins an election. They gotta have an opportunity to do what they said they wanna do. They ran,
Yep.
you know what I mean? So how do you balance that?
Yep.
Because that doesn't negate all the work that every other elected official that's been sitting here, in my case, since 2016, the things we've prioritized.
Yep.
So the balance is what's frustrated.
Yep.
And that's what we're dealing with, and we deal with it every year.
Yeah, and we really try to represent
Yeah.
the totality of what is said here. And then when we come out, represent to you why, if you ask for something and we were not, as a small budget committee, able to incorporate it into the budget, tell you why not. But you, as an individual counselor, always have the ability to try to amend the budget. Or cause us collectively in this public forum to come around to a new idea. Hey, what if we did this?
And it could be done
Yeah.
during the vote.
And I've
Okay.
had those
So-
discussions when
And it's
I've had
almost impossible.
challenges with specific things.
Yeah.
I've had those meetings with
So
the
let
individuals.
Counselor Dutton speak, and then we're gonna move on to 4.
I just wonder, being new to all of this myself, when Jared and Christie
Right.
Be back there.
were talking, you just mentioned that
Mom and Dad.
after it going to the mayor, there were cuts made to some departments and not cuts to other departments. How do we parse that information out? What departments get cut and which didn't, and which departments might be benefiting from the cuts of the other departments? I mean, do we have like a breakdown? Once you guys get that information, can you not pass that information?
We don't get that information.
It's just
You'd have to-
kind of collected in the
You'd have to
budget
look
book.
at the budget.
You would have
and
to look
each
at the book.
line item.
Because
Yeah.
it shows
Right.
the
It shows-
decreases.
It shows
But I
that
think
it's
what
going
she's
away.
saying is if you could, you all know, right, if you all could
Like
just
a
do it.
summary.
Yeah.
Summary, would make it
A
easier for us to
summarization
be sitting up here
of-
going through a big ass.
That way we can still do our due diligence and do,
You know what I mean?
work through the
It
budget
can be
book.
done easily, can be presented a lot.
Yeah,
Does that make any sense?
We did attempt on each department to call it an operational, forget the exact language,
Operational reduction target.
Yeah, and then we did distinguish between any personnel that might have been cut for that and any supplies, services type things. So we did attempt to do that in the budget book. And then you also see the things that were added that were different from plan. So like you clearly see the 275 that's being added for office and youth and family stuff.
I think it would be helpful to have like a spreadsheet or
Yeah.
a one sheet where it's like, these are all the positions or cuts that were offered, these are the ones we took. You can go through, I'm 7 years on and I've been on small budget and not, I've gone through this budget book 6 times with a
Yeah.
highlighter, notes and everything
Yeah.
else. And I'm not brand new.
Yeah.
So it would be helpful if there was just like a summary list, because I feel like we've been
Yes.
hunting and pecking to figure
Yeah.
out, and that's where it's like, wait, we cut the urban planner?
Yeah.
Well, the urban planner helps us plan, and then we're
Exactly,
having these
that's
realizations.
what I'm asking for, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm
Yeah.
asking for,
Yes.
that way,
Just
it's
so
a
it's plain
reference.
language and also so constituents can see
Yeah,
it.
it's a
Exactly.
reference
The
point,
state presents
starting
it in an
point to be
Excel.
able to access that information adequately in the book.
Well, and
Okay,
even
we're gonna-
things like the overtime
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Okay, so let's move on. Counselor Bush, that document that you,
We're still on item.
that document that you have in your hand is what we spend most of, the vast majority of our small budget meetings with.
Is this, that's what I was
This is
wondering.
very ambitious.
Yeah, okay, 4, ordinance approving and adopting capital improvements plan for the city of Tulsa through 30 as part of this year's budget.
I think that's just a part of the budget, this is the capital portion.
Okay, 5, ordinance authorizing the mayor to transfer any expended unencumbered appropriations of $100,000. This is just pretty standard. Jack, how long have we been doing this? 10 years? 15 years? Okay, any questions? 6, ordinance amending the fiscal year 24 budget, 24-25 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $4.7959 million from unassigned fund balance for Team UA and $150,000 between departments for TPFA.
So this is the much fabled year-end budget amendment, and if you can go to the ordinance itself. This, kind of a academic exercise a little bit. We are appropriating additional funds for the departments identified here to cover areas where they exceeded their budgets. But we have also not included as part of this, we have identified sufficient savings in other areas to wash out these increases. I just chose not to do a council transfer because if we miss the estimate by even $1, then we end the year with an unbalanced budget.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? Did I hear
Yes.
you right? These listed here went over their budget,
They will go over
They
the
will.
budget by the end of the year.
right, which is in 3 weeks,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? Okay, so but you found funds elsewhere where they didn't spend all their money and we cover the
We have
nut?
projected, yes. It is an estimate.
Okay.
So
I do
what-
want, this is
Go
probably
ahead.
important right now to also mention that we did not bring a budget action at the time that the negotiations for police and fire unions completed, and they got an increase that was higher than what was originally planned. We've just been bringing that at the end of the year for multiple years now, so that's part of this. It's that compensation increase.
So it's not all overtime, it's also negotiated compensation increase.
Correct.
Okay, are you going to change the way you do that in the future?
Yes, we talked about that.
Okay.
We've talked about it a couple of times. But yes, we'll start bringing those after the negotiations, after the contract's signed.
Okay, so let's say in September, we should see a budget action if there are any changes. If there are not, we won't see anything. And then at the end of the year, similar to this, next year, so everybody remember this, in '26, we'll see something similar to this, but it should just reflect OT. Okay, what's the source of these funds? Is it unallocated or unassigned fund
For
balance?
this action, unassigned fund balance
Okay,
is what is covering the expenses.
yeah.
So the public safety tax, so is that being used for, that's not being transferred into general fund, right?
Correct, this to cover.
Okay, just to
the
cover
overage in that fund
overage, like overtime of those PDO ones and
Salaries.
FDO ones?
and salaries.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay. 7, resolution is part of the '26 budget providing for crediting to the sinking fund a certain portion of a whole bunch of things related to sanitary sewer, sewage disposal, and enterprise funds.
This is just the authorization to pay debt on, I believe it's the final year for general obligation bond debt that the sewer fund was obligated to pay off. So it's authorizing the transfer to the sinking fund.
Okay,
Go
anyone
buy a new
else?
car after that?
Okay, 8, resolution as part of the 26 budget clarifying and affirming a certain CIP agreement dated April 1, 21 with TPFA for $4.315 million in parking bonds to refund TPA revenue bonds. Do I need to say anything more than that?
No, pretty much every one of these is, or going after this is the annual project agreement with TPFA for previous debt issuances that they've done on our behalf for parking, for stormwater, and for the 2016 Vision revenue bonds.
13 through 16?
What is that, all the way through, is what you said applicable
Looks like it's
to all the rest of these?
Yes, sir. Now I can go one at a time if you'd like.
Well, let me just summarize these real quick. So 9 has to do with $59.65 million in bonds for OTC for the purpose of relocating City Hall. 10 is $16 million for TPFA with respect to BOK Arena. 11 is $115.3 million for Tulsa Economic Vision Advance Fund. 12 is $118.1 between TPFA for the same 2016 Vision Advance Fund. 13 is $24.15 million with TPFA and revenue bonds for stormwater management. 14 is $8.35 million for stormwater management, again TPFA. 15 is 6.925 for the same uses. 16 is 10.075 million for the same uses. Do you have anything else to say?
No, sir.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
On a timing point, so items 3 and 4, that will go on the 18th. The rest of the items are probably okay to go on the 11th unless there's an objection or question about that.
Anybody have any objection to that strategy
Which
outlined by
items?
Ms. Davis?
3 and 4?
Items 3 and 4, which are the budget and capital plan adoption. We will put that on the 18th for the 5 o'clock. But the other items in this meeting that you've gone through, those would still appear on the 11th.
Okay. Fine.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we almost did it. It's 2:32. We are adjourned.